I'm Laura Vinroot Poole of Capital, and this is What We Wore. Trish Wescoat Pound founded TWP after a winding journey through the fashion industry, experiencing both success and failure. She's a testament to the full circle nature of life, now partnering with Andrew Rosen again of Theory 30 years later. We've met once, and actually we've maybe met more than that. When I was reading your bio, I may have met you while in the Theory days, but I don't know much about you. Tell me where you're from.
Originally, I grew up in Oklahoma, right on the
Oh, wow.
right on the border of Kansas and Oklahoma.
Oh, wow.
So Midwestern.
And how would you describe your childhood?
So I grew up in, like I said, I grew up right on the border of Kansas and Oklahoma, and I grew up in a very small town. My mother was very young when she had me. Um, my early childhood and my early life, I think, a lot of the takeaways that I have now, and even some of the influences that I have now comes from that time, right? It's like, very Midwestern in the fact in just having a good work ethic was the most important thing, and even to this day, I pride myself on my work ethic. Like I'm going to, in school when you get like the perfect attendance record, I'm the girl that got the perfect attendance record, so I think that like a lot of like just growing up in the Midwest was about, just having a great work ethic for me. And I understood at a very early age that whatever was my life was going to be, it was going to be up to me to make it and to make my life what I wanted it to be. And so I think that a lot of my drive comes from that. I think a lot of my persistence comes from that. I think that there are a wealth of things that come, from my childhood, although it wasn't a perfect childhood. I'm not sure anyone has that, but it definitely gave me the drive, the perseverance, the work ethic that I think has a lot to do with where I am in my life now.
Was fashion or were clothes a part of that? Did your mom make your clothes or your grandmother, or where did
Not
that
at
start?
No, not at all.
Huh.
Actually, we were just lucky to have clothes. We didn't grow up with a lot of money, so it was like, I remember going to get, those few things you got before school, and and what a big deal that was, and how exciting that was. So there were definitely moments like that in my childhood. The biggest thing, and it's funny because I just recently thought of this when people say, "How did you end up in fashion?" The truth is, it was kind of serendipitous because I just ended up in fashion. It wasn't like I went to school, I wanted to go to law school. I lived in DC. I worked for a lobbying firm. And then one summer I came to New York and I stayed. And that kind of like that decision to come to New York, there's a few decisions you make in your early life that you don't know at the time that they're going to completely change the path and direction of your life. But I think that that was one of them. As a young child, I had this desire to make everything around me beautiful. It was very important. Like that was like I just wanted everything to be pretty. And even now, I tend to band-aid things that are difficult by making them pretty. Like by taking either a lesson from them or applying them in some ways. I don't know. It's just like I have this ability to see the beauty in things that aren't always beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like been always a very big part of it. So even as a child, I just, even now, like I'll sit and look at a chair and I'll like go and rearrange it, whatever the chair is to create a moment so that that chair becomes aesthetically pleasing. I cook more if my dishes are nice, like that kind of
I've
thing.
been in your apartment, and it's very beautiful.
Oh, thank you. We're very lucky to have the space that we do in New York. I work, as you know, like when we first started showing the collection, it was in my apartment, and then the space in the very top became available. And it's just been, I mean, my commute is very simple. It's 2 floors.
So going back to growing up, did you study political science, or what
Yeah,
did you study
political
in school?
science and
Mm.
psychology. So I
Huh.
think that when I was younger, like I said, it wasn't like, fashion um wasn't a luxury, so like for me it was like whatever things I got, for school, I'd have to be really creative to make them look different. Do you know what I mean? So it's like there's a
Hmm.
creative lens that kind of came into my early childhood, like I said, at this innate desire to make things around me really beautiful. And also like I was crazy about paper dolls. Like I mean, up
Mm.
until probably way too late in life. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I became obsessed with the idea, because it just gave me the opportunity to look at size and proportions and to do all these things and to make something that was kind of like at the end a cohesive, beautiful thing. So I really enjoyed things like I always enjoyed making things pretty.
And so did you learn to sew? I mean, were you altering things when you bought them at thrift stores or?
No, just not really. No, my mom wasn't a homemaker like that, and I didn't really have anyone around me. It was more the tucking or the, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, rolling it up or it was always
Which is really what your clothes are now. It's so
right, I layer.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I
But
layer.
also
That's
they're
what I do.
rolled and they're all kind of
Yeah. I put it
zhuzhed.
on. It's like if you like everything's zhuzhed. I like a zhuzh. But it was more like that, or just like making things cool, like by changing my shoelaces. It was like little creative tweaks to make what limited wardrobe I had kind of stretch a little bit. So I think that like there was always this like that was always a part of me when I really really, really, really kind of like went from being a president to being a creative director was also just this moment in my career where I was working with Andrew at Theory, and we had a design director who didn't complete the season, didn't even start the season. And Andrew was like, well, you can do it. And I was like, I absolutely cannot do it. I don't want to do it. Number one, number two, I didn't go to school for it. And that was always kind of a really difficult thing for me because I'm such a purist in a lot of things that I didn't go to school for design made me feel like I could never be a designer, if
Well,
that
let's
makes
talk about
sense.
you. So you went to school for political science and psychology, and then you went
Yeah.
to law school?
No, I wanted to go to law school. So I
You
went to DC. Yeah,
uh-huh.
sorry. I didn't go to law school.
But you
Probably would have been a
applied.
good idea because I've had a lot of experiences where law would have come in handy. But unfortunately, I didn't. I actually didn't get in. And I was like, okay, like I didn't really plan for that. I kind of thought at some point that just seemed a good idea. But also remember that for my generation, it was like that was one of the most, like go to law school,
Yeah,
be
yeah,
a
yeah.
doctor.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, so when when I came to New York, I had two jobs. I worked as a receptionist at Calvin Klein. I had friends that were at
And how did that
Georgetown.
happen?
I had friends that were at Georgetown, and when they all moved back to New York, just from living in DC, I knew one person who was in fashion, and I knew one person who was a party promoter. So I worked as a receptionist at Calvin Klein during the day, and then at night I worked at Nell's, which was
Oh my
used
God,
to be
that's amazing. Wait, but
yeah.
the first part of it, what I remember about Calvin Klein at that time was you couldn't come in with coffee from, a New York coffee
Oh
cup.
yeah.
When you came into Calvin Klein, you had to pour it into one of their coffee cups, even as a visitor.
Oh, it was
Um,
crazy.
so
Yeah.
that must have been a real rude
Well,
awakening coming from DC.
yeah, for me, it was just kind of like, it was a little mind numbing, to be honest, because I was a receptionist and I wasn't allowed to have anything on my desk. And I wasn't
Yeah.
allowed, and I would always be like, do you have work for me to do? Like, do you need anything done? I'm happy to do anything while I'm
I'm
sitting here.
smart.
Yeah, please pick me. But it was like, just like, shoulders back and down, sitting straight up. Um, and so that lasted a minute. And then
And
after a
then
couple,
Nels. Tell me about that though.
Oh, nails. Okay. So I knew, like I said, I knew someone who was a party promoter, and I moved to New York, and I didn't have the money to live in New York. In fact, I was so broke that I would rollerblade everywhere because I had no money to take any kind of public transportation, and I was scared to death of the subway anyway. Um, I think I was dating a guy once who said that someone saw me holding onto the back of a bus, and it might have been his girlfriend. Um, So, but not that I would dare do that now. So I worked at Nails at night. So I would basically go to Calvin Klein at the day and sit and be very straight and, whatever. And then at night I would go and I'd work the door and at Nails. And
That's
the
amazing.
first, yeah, the first night I worked actually at Nails, there was a guy named Mark Baker who was a major promoter and, always like brought in, beautiful girls and models and what have you, whatnot. And there was a line at Nell's, and in my Midwestern mind, like you wait in line, right? And when it's your
Yeah.
turn, it's your turn. You know what I mean? So this whole idea that some people, and this was difficult for me, and really why I never went in. After I got off work, I left. You know what I mean? So I was like,
Yeah.
not for me, just because I felt like it wasn't fair. I know that sounds crazy, but I was like, I don't know. I had this like kind of like, about it a bit. But really, the first night I was at Nell's, Mark Baker walks in and, skips the line 'cause he's a promoter. Fair enough, with these beautiful girls. And he goes to shake hands with this guy that's waiting in the line, and the guy stabs him.
What?
Yes,
Trish,
stabs him.
because he
And
was mad that he got. I mean, he didn't even know
they
him, but
had
he.
some beef. I mean, at the time, yeah, there was some beef between these two guys. And instead, and like, so the police come, the ambulance comes, he ends up being fine and survived and everything. Um, but the biggest thing, and this was my first night working, was that everyone after was like, when are we getting in? And I'm like, wait, this guy just got stabbed. Do you know what I mean?
What?
And you were shaking his hand, so I assumed that you were friends. You know what I mean? And apparently not.
At that time too. So working at Calvin Klein in the day, what did you learn from working at Calvin Klein?
Nothing. I mean, literally nothing. I mean, I guess what I learned, if my takeaway was, it was such a well-run machine. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And it was, and they knew they knew who they were. They had such a strong identity. You know what I mean? So it was like, there was just, that would be my takeaway now looking back. It was just like how such a big machine had such a singular identity. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think that that was interesting, that all these, hundreds and hundreds of people, thousands of people that work there,
Yes.
it's like going into
They
a
were
Ralph
all
Lauren
on
store.
board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that, from a branding perspective, when branding, the way that people approach branding was different, it was like interesting. So, I
Did
mean,
it did it change the way you dressed?
for a minute, I've had so many different looks. I've like been Our Lady of Wayne Scott, when I used to wear, black Prada sweaters with white collars sticking out and big black skirts and, heavy shoes. I've been a bohemian hippie. I've been, so I've kind of like hit it all. There's not, yeah, for sure it influenced the way I work though, because at the time I just remember being like, one day I'm going to buy a Calvin Klein, coat, or, you know what I mean? Like it was like
Yeah.
that, like, like I really appreciated the quality.
Yeah.
And I've always like, and even now that's the biggest thing for me is fabricate, starts with fabrications and just really good quality.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that too, probably. Yeah.
And so how did your career in fashion progress from those first two jobs that are amazing? That's like quintessential New York story.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially back then too, because it was like the 90s, it was like
Yeah.
it was like just a very different time. I mean, Nels was at the time like, I mean, it was a big deal. Nels
Yeah, it
was like
was a
the
really
place
big
people
deal.
went. And the meat packing was, like there was like one night after work, this guy was like, I'll take you to this place. What was it called? The Vault. That's what it was.
Okay.
Because I never went out. I left, I got my money, I went home, I had to go to work the next day. I did it for 7 years. I
Wow.
worked clubs for 7 years.
Wow.
Um, yeah, a long time. And until Theory.
And what an unlikely path from a lobbyist in DC or working for a lobbying firm.
And that was very interesting too.
Yeah.
Especially when, one of them asked me if I would sit on his lap and go to his high school reunion with him just simply because we were both from Oklahoma. I was like, not for me.
Good.
Yeah.
So,
But it was very different. It was just very interesting to have all these different experiences. And it was like, and for me, it's all kind of a study on human nature.
yeah.
Like anything for me is always kind of emotional, and it's, I feel things viscerally. And it's like, so everything for me was just like, wow, this whole kind of like study on, us as people, and, us as humans, and, like these little, like there's all these little like microorganisms and like these little, societies in all these different towns. And I've always found that fascinating. It's like we live in our own world, and that sometimes feel like that's the entire world, especially with social media. It's like, still at the end of the day, it kind of feels like you have your own people, you have your own tribe, you have your own community. And all these different communities, are
Yeah.
just kind of fascinating to me.
And so what was your next community after that? Where did you go?
Well, I had a few jobs, and then I ended up like my turn of luck, or when the really, we all have them, we just don't realize at the time, was working for Andrew. And Andrew Rosen is my partner at TWP. Andrew Rosen was my mentor, Andrew Rosen has affected and changed my life at a lot of different periods of my life. So it's kind of been interesting, to know him. I worked for him in 1998 at Theory for 7 years, and I learned about
And in what
fabrications.
capacity, Trish? What were you doing
I
at that
started
time?
as VP of sales, and then I was president, and then I became creative director, design director. I think there wasn't a creative director, design director at the time, um, when we didn't have one. So, but the good thing about being in a startup, and I always say to everyone that's young, if you can get into a really good startup, I mean, you just have all the opportunity to learn everything. I mean, I
Yeah.
knew about fabrications. I went to the fabric mills. I sat in the fittings. I just like everything. If there was a problem we all had to fix it.
Yeah.
So it was an incredibly rich learning experience for me. And it really was that moment when he was like, you're going to do this. You basically are the merchandiser. You're basically the one going to, how to do this. And I was like, I absolutely do not want to do this. And I did. And I was like, oh, I like that. But it took me a minute to be like, to kind of allow myself to like it. Do you know what I mean? Because I was like so much directed, I want to be a CEO one day, which
Yeah.
now I can't imagine myself being a CEO of anything, including my own life. So I don't know. But I had like I worked in a different side of my brain then, and I trained
Yeah.
myself, even though math wasn't necessarily easy for me. I just learned had retail math. I
Yeah.
understood a percent to total. Once I understood percent to totals, my entire life changed. And I was like, I get it. You know what I mean? So
Did you have mentors along the way other than Andrew within that system, I guess?
I think at every job I had, there was someone I learned from, and sometimes it's like, I learned what not to do in some cases, or you know what I mean? Like that did happen too. But more than that, I think there was always like something, a big takeaway. Like I remember working at this small knitwear company before I worked for Andrew. And the woman who was the owner and with her husband, she had such a fabulous sense of style. You know what I mean? So I always remember like her coming in and me like, and her being like, if you want to look like dress like me, you got to sell this. And I was like, oh, you have a point. But at the same time, I actually want to sell what you're wearing and dress like you. You know what I mean? Is that a possibility in this career? So everywhere I went, there was like someone I kind of like remember, like, but
Yeah.
Andrew really was the one that saw potential in me and then kind of like got me to go in that direction, and I wouldn't do what I'm doing today if it wasn't for him, for sure.
And what position or what job during that time stands out as the most important sort of turning point for you that changed your perspective, that creative director part?
1000%. That was the moment when I was like, oh, I guess I can do this. But then, I taught myself how to sketch. I have pattern makers that, I'm not handcrafting my own patterns. For sure not doing that, but like I have pattern makers that I work with. I know how to make the basics of making a pattern. I spend a lot of time. We fit probably about, so basically, I guess some people might not know the ins and outs of our business, but basically the way that we work, which is different than some, is that we have a working atelier. And basically what that means is we have pattern makers and we have seamstresses and we have sample hands and we have an entire pattern room in New York City and we make everything in New York City. So we're very involved and so I fit these garments at least 6 to 7 times. I mean, not that I should be fitting them that much, but until we get them to production. So we're constantly going through and fitting and fitting and fitting.
Knowing how to make patterns and that whole process, was that from Theory or was that from Haute
Theory.
Hippie?
Well, what
Okay.
it started at Theory, and then when I left Theory, I had a couple of jobs, and then I started this company called Haute Hippie. And when I started Haute Hippie, I had like $40,000 in my bank account. I was a single mom.
Mhm.
And it was rolling racks in the house. This is not my first time with rolling racks in my house. It's kind of been a recurring theme. But when I did that, I was like, I don't know why. It was like I was at Liz Claiborne and I had this job as like a CMO and CMO of all contemporary brands and a creative director and president of this line called Laundry. And it was like I was there 6 months. Like literally they were just selling things off. I got there and then they just started selling things off.
Yeah.
I think that like all that taught me about production, and supply chain and
Mhm.
all of the stuff. And like that really kind of introduced me to Asia. So that was kind of a big moment. I wasn't there long, but I think it was like all those little things that happened after Theory where I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to have this title, then I actually have to do the job. And so then I started to just learn and just hone different things, like teaching myself to sketch, really doing my own fabrics, and now it's like how many years later, a couple, I mean, oh God, a while. Um, yeah, a long time, like 18 years later, 15 years later, even to this day where I'm just like, okay, I'm okay. I know how to do my job. But
Yeah.
every day I wake up and I'm like, how do I do my job better?
But and then tell me about Haute Hippie, like what had you always wanted to start your own collection? How did that come about? Or did you see a big hole in the market?
It's always been holes in the market for me.
Yeah.
And I always kind of start, I'm not always, but I kind of like when businesses take off for me, they're sometimes in difficult times. Like Haute Hippie was 2008.
Oh my God.
And so, yeah, the financial crisis happened in 2009.
And how
But I
old was
did,
your daughter at the time?
oh my God. So 2009, Jillian was 7.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
so working out of your apartment and you just had this idea that you couldn't find what?
Yeah, I guess I don't really know why. Well, I guess I'd also come from, I'd had a minute at Michael Kors, and I'd always respected Michael as a designer, and I'd always kind of thought that, he was incredibly talented, but also understood his woman so much, and
Mhm.
he had all those different elements of her life. And when I was at Theory, it was very much about tailoring and shirting and, very specific classifications. And I kind of wanted to do something that represented all the different things I wanted that I couldn't find, and so, famously, I guess, or not so much, but, we did beaded, skirts with sweatshirts because that's how
Yeah.
I dressed,
Yeah.
so it was kind of just like going from something that had been very clean for a while, but then also adding in the other things that I wanted. But at the time too, remember, basically in magazines you could check, 3 boxes: minimal, whatever it was, funky, and businesswoman. I don't even know, but it was like, it was, people were very much, they had one look, and I didn't really always
Yeah.
have one look. I had a lot of looks, and I think a lot of women did, but like, it was just different. It was,
And
now
what I
everyone's so much more eclectic and mixed and
yeah. And
interesting.
and what I recall about the collection was that it grew really quickly and had
Yeah.
stores, did it
It,
not?
it was crazy. It was our first season. I missed New York because I started in, it was December, and Fashion Week is in February. And I just started making a collection in the end of February before I turned 40 or something. I don't know. It was like, some milestone. I was like, I'm going to do this before I turn 40. I turned 40 January 23rd. So it didn't give me a lot of time, but that was my goal. And so we did this little collection, and I went to LA Market, and Betsy Eisenberg from 1011 was my rep, and also a friend of mine. And she was like, I've never seen this line. I don't know what it is. Like, like, I can't believe I'm taking a line I've never seen. I'm like, you've got to trust me. And even though, and I'm really like, I don't even know if it's any good, but it was great. I mean, that first season, we did $4 million in one market in LA.
Oh my God. And what was it like having stores? How did you do that? I mean, you'd never done that before. How did you figure out how to do that?
You just figure it out. I mean, not well. You know what I mean? You make a lot of mistakes along the way. Haute Hippie was very different because it was much more like I did everything, production and da 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 da,
Yeah.
and then now, and and like, it was do it yourself. It was like, okay, well, fake it till you make it. You know what I mean? How does this
Yeah.
work? What's it, like, I knew nothing about retail. Well, yeah, nothing, absolutely nothing. I was gonna think, I had worked for companies that had retail, had stores, but it was like very segmented. It was big companies at that point in time.
And what was your biggest struggle as an entrepreneur at that
Then
time?
it was not
Mhm.
having a partner like Andrew Rosen.
Yeah. And who did you ask people that you work with in the past, friends, or how did you
No, but
get advice on how to
I made a mistake. I never wanted to ask for help.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I never wanted to
Yeah.
bother anyone. I never wanted to ask favors. You know what I mean? I'd ask it on behalf of Theory or any company I've worked for, but then I got to a point where I was like, wow, you were able to ask, or to do things when you were here, but you can't do it for yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, even probably until very recently, that was kind of like an issue for me. And now,
Mm.
I'm very lucky because there's so many things that I don't have to worry about,
Yeah.
and that's amazing. But the most challenging thing about being an entrepreneur, for me,
With
at
that first project,
with
Trish,
that first
with
project, I think that I didn't have any work-life balance, and my work and my life blended. So people lived with me, people slept on my floor. You know what I mean? I was like, I just, there was no balance, and I think at the time a lot of startups were like that. I mean,
yeah.
if you look at, like, I mean, I was just watching WeWork or something like that. And we were not that, trust me. But like, it was just all about, you had to be there 24 hours a day, and
Yeah.
everyone had to be, you know what I mean? It was like, go, go,
Yeah.
go, go. And that was a mistake because I burnt people out and I burnt myself out, Even when Haute Hippie was going out of business, I was like on the, it was like the Titanic, and I was rearranging the lawn furniture, trying to make it look pretty as it was going down. And I think that it was work-life balance. I think it was, the other big challenge, fashion's a grind. I
Yeah.
mean, it seems pretty, but it's a lot about cash flow and, production and deliveries, and, there's a lot that goes into it, that's not glamorous and not fun.
I am aware.
I know.
What are you most proud of that you created with the Haute Hippie?
It's so funny because it was very painful when that ended, and it was like I lost my identity, I lost my money, I got divorced. I mean, a lot happened in a very short period of time around that. So it was a very painful thing for me, and I think I had to completely detach from it to start this.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
How,
I just had to let it go and wish it well and thank it for what it gave me. But it was very painful. It was one of the most painful things that's ever happened to me in my life. And I know that sounds crazy, but it was. Um,
because you felt like a failure, because you felt like what?
Both. Oh, for the failure, the reason I started this collection was because well, a few things. Number one, creatively, being creative and having that outlet and having that flow, it's like an escape. It's a
Mhm.
beautiful place. You know what I mean? That you can live and exist. And if I could be in the flow all day long, that would be my ideal.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that I needed it. I needed it. I needed to have purpose. I need a reason to get out of bed. I need to have something in my life that's purposeful. I think that even in wanting to be to go into law, I kind of saw myself as Barbara Streisand and the way we were. You know what I mean? I've always needed a purpose. I
Yeah.
needed something like that. I just do. I'm driven by that. And also because my daughter had seen me really fall and really, really, really make a mess of things. And it
And
was
you mean
very
professionally and
and
personally?
personally, yeah, at the
Yeah.
same time. And it was really important for me that she could see me fall, but that she could also see me get back up. Because
Mhm.
then I knew no matter what happened to her in her life, if she'd seen me fall, and
Yeah.
really it was a
Epically.
disaster. Yes. In my life, it was epically. Because it was also something that was just on me. I was an adult. Do you know what I mean? There was nothing.
Yeah.
I made all my own decisions and ended up where I ended up. And I'm very much about being accountable. I think it's incredibly important to be accountable, but I beat myself up. And so I think that I wanted to know that no matter what happened, that that she would at some point in her life remember that I did it and know that she could do it too.
You knew that consciously at the time? You thought that? I
Oh
mean,
yeah, every day I woke up and I was like, I'm getting out of bed because I have to show Jillian you can get out of bed.
yeah.
And every day it was like a little thing, because I thought that everyone was talking about me and what a failure I was. No one gave a shit. After, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like after the
Oh,
first
yeah.
time
I
they
don't
heard it, they're
remember.
like, right, no one knows, but in your mind, it's so much bigger,
Yeah.
right? It's like in your
Yeah.
mind, it's like, oh my God, how can I ever leave my house again? And then and just every day, and I kept my little pattern room and I really spent a lot of time there. And it was a very healing place for me. And every season, I'd be like, I'm going to show this season. I'd be like, oh, it's not good enough yet. You know what I mean? And that went on until Andrew, really.
And that was you already had this idea for this other collection?
Yeah. So I
Like
started
the minute Haute Hippie was out
the
was
minute
over?
the same week, I found a little pattern room and I started making patterns. It was also very selfish. I needed it. It is being creative and
Yeah.
having an outlet has saved my life. And so
Yeah.
I needed it, and it was like, so yeah, so almost immediately, and it was completely the opposite of what I did.
I was gonna say this is such a
Yeah.
left turn. And did you know that that was really missing in the market? And as Haute Hippie was, winding down, you thought actually people really want this.
Well, originally it was kind of like I always think about like if you were an artist and you painted, like do you paint the same thing every day and get better at it? That's one way, right? It's like kind of they have the same style. And then there are people who kind of change their styles.
Mm-hmm.
And I always have to do something different than I
Mm-hmm.
did before. If I did it the same thing, it wouldn't feel like it was new or interesting to me. So part of it was just kind of like, okay, I want to take a minute, I want to breathe, and I want to make a really good shirt. I haven't been able to make a really good shirt in so long because I've been
Yeah.
lost in all of the it was just tumultuous at the very end. So I was like, I just want to make a good shirt. I want to make a good blazer. I want to make a good pant. I felt like there was always this big void in the market between contemporary and designer. And I saw it happen with Theory because there was only Junior and Bridge at the time, right?
Yeah.
So at Bloomingdale's, I remember the wooden escalators, and you'd go to, and it was like Dollhouse, Buffalo, and and Theory, and then you go upstairs, and it was like Ellie Tahari and Anne Klein and all that. I mean, not completely gone, but it's not what it used to be as
Mhm.
far as size wise, because it was like at a certain age you just had to go up to that floor, and
Yeah.
now at any age you can buy and shop and wear whatever you want. So I saw that happen with I saw that Contemporary took all this market space from what was then called Bridge. And so I was kind of like, well, there's got to be something between Contemporary, because I also felt at the time that a lot of the Contemporary lines, the quality was kind of like not what I thought it should be for the prices they were charging. I
Mhm.
kind of felt like the quality and there was like not, for me as a consumer, they're just I couldn't understand why the prices were going up but the quality was going down. And then I saw in designer, and especially after COVID, when the prices like shot up,
Mhm.
where sweaters used to be 1,500 and then they were 3,000. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And so I felt that I could do something in the middle of contemporary and designer that was really well made clothes with the best fabrics, and truly our fabrications come from the best mills. They're all the same mills that all the designers are using in Europe.
Mhm.
um the best fabrications, making it in New York, having an atelier, and I just felt like I felt like I want to wear really well made clothes that feel good and last, and can be worn in multiple ways, and I want there to be the quality there, but I don't want to pay that price point. So I kind of felt like there have to be other people that feel like I do. Yeah, then COVID happened, so of course people couldn't take what they'd ordered, and it was understandable. And also, it was the first time we were ever shipping.
Yeah.
So then I'd taken what little money I had left, and at that point, I had like maybe 3 or 4 months left to pay rent, and that was it.
Oh
And I
my
was like,
God.
"Fuck, how did I get myself in this situation?" And and then I was doing a trunk show in Miami with my friends who lived there and selling my shirts, and they made all their friends come and buy a shirt. And Andrew had a woman who had been a customer of our years ago, Joyce Gatto. She had like had a store, knew Andrew and I, now's in real estate in Miami, and she saw Andrew and was like, "Oh, you should see this line Trish is doing." And I hadn't spoken to him in years, and he called me and he's like, "Do you want to have lunch?" And I'm like, "Sure, I'd love to see you." And his story is, and I guess he was like, "Well, bring me and show me what you're doing." And I guess probably knowing me, I look like a bag lady. And I went in with some huge bag with stuff stuffed in there and started pulling it out. And he was like, "Okay, okay, I'll do it. I'll do this with you." And it was just like that. Like he really trusts his instincts, and he really, and I was like, "Oh my God," it was like the universe. And it was so funny because I had driven from New York to Florida to Miami. And on the way, I stopped in this little town, and I'm going to blank on the name right now. It's this little, there's two places in the US where this exists. One is outside of Buffalo in Lilliesdale, and the other one, oh my God, what's it called? It's in Florida. It's this little town of
Oh, I know you're gonna say.
psychics.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'd
I
gone
know.
to the
I
one
know
in
the one in New York.
Lilydale. Yeah, I'd gone to the one in Lilydale, and then I on the way to Florida, before I'd seen Andrew and this had happened, I stopped at this little place, and I'd gone to 3 or 4, because I would like to have a second or third opinion. And I was like, and this woman said, "There's going to be two men that come into your life, and they're from your past, and one of them was really important in your past and in business, and those are going to be your partners." And I was like, going through the list of, no, 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 no.
And did
And
you
I
always
did.
think it was business, or did you think it was romantic when she said
Always
that?
business. Yeah. She said
Okay.
business. Yeah.
Okay.
The romantic part, that went away a long time ago. Um, yeah, no. So, but it was business. And then and I kind of like was like, okay, and she said it's going to be okay. And, people are going to buy the line. And then when I got to Florida, and then it was like amazing. And then, and it was Andrew. And I was like, wow, how
Wow.
incredible. Yeah. So I'm very, very, very lucky.
Um,
I mean,
Tell
it's
me
always like the
what
universe always makes me wait until the last minute
the last
just to make
minute.
sure that I can be grateful after, but I'm lucky.
What's the most important thing that you've learned from Andrew? First time around or this time?
That's a great question. I guess the first time around, it's interesting. The first time around, when at the very end of it, at the very end of Theory, I had kind of always thought that I was the CEO in training. I didn't really at the time understand he was never going to retire and I was never going to be CEO in a Japanese company. But at the time, I was just like, when they sold to Uniqlo, I was like, okay, like this is my direction. And he was like, no, Trish, you need to do this, and he was like, do what you love, the money will come.
Mm.
And I was like, and then I left. I didn't want to be a merchandiser. I'd been president. I thought I was being, that I
Yeah.
was being
Demoted.
demoted. Yeah. And at the time, I didn't understand that, I always thought everything just kind of went like this. And if you work really hard, it's just going to go up. I didn't understand that it goes like this, um, and then it, throws you curves. So I really wasn't interested and I left. And yeah, and then I ended up doing exactly what he told me I should be doing. So
And
that
then,
was one thing. And now it's probably more, he's incredibly patient, and I think maybe we all become more patient with age, but like, like I'll get upset about like, the construction of a jacket and where's the chest piece and how could they have sewn it without that, and I'm like, ooh, and he's like, he just kind of like, he has a very calming presence. He's also very good at like understanding, like he knows how to drive, he knows how to build a business, so there's a lot of
yeah.
stuff that I don't have to worry about now,
Yeah.
that I did. I kind of learn a lot from him every day. And I, learn a lot about managing people, about the younger generation, and how things have changed.
And what have you
And
learned about that? Speaking of, and your daughter's working with the company.
yeah, that was not my first choice. In the beginning, Andrew was like, you know what, Jillian grew up with me. Jillian has a great eye. Jillian is the director of styling, so she's doing all the photo shoots. She's doing all of the visuals. Like she's does all of the looks, and she likes it, and she's really good at it. And I'm really proud of her because I was a little worried. I wasn't sure about work ethic. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I was like, like I see other kids your age, and she's very driven, has a great work ethic. Andrew thought it was really important because also I bounce off of her so much,
Yeah.
and like it's like we travel together, we vintage shop together, her and her friends. I've kind of always been, except for a few years, the single mom that everyone came to my house.
Yeah.
I get them dressed to go out at night, and it's like that really interesting thing of like, you know, um, age, because I think that youth it makes you relevant. It keeps
Mm.
you kind of like in the know. And I think that if you have older friends, they have a different perspective, it's like, and their perspective is based on years of experience. And although they're their own experiences and everyone needs to have their own experiences, I think it's a really beautiful dance. So, it's like kind of like, I always feel like I'm doing that dance with Jillian, and I feel
Yeah.
like I'm always doing that dance with her friends. And so Andrew was like, no, this will work. And I was like, so scared,
Yeah.
because I couldn't, like, how would I ever fire my own daughter? You know what I
Right.
mean? And I also didn't want her to come in and feel like my daughter. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
she reports to Andrew. So the most amazing thing really has been watching her report to Andrew and learn from him, because he was
Hmm.
like my first
Yeah.
boss,
Yeah, exactly.
and
Wow.
now he's her first boss.
Mm.
So there's a lot of full circle moments and all of that. But yeah, it's going great actually. So,
What's the
you
most
know,
challenging part?
with working with Jillian, I really nothing, honestly, because she reports to Andrew. We don't really
Yeah.
like we kind of both have our own things. We live and work together,
Yeah.
so it's a lot, and we travel together, so it's a lot of together. Um, but no, it's been kind of easy. I'm really happy. I was a little nervous in the beginning
Yeah.
because
I
my
ha-
daughter's the most important person in my life. So
and it's always weird when work and home or human life intersects. I think I've always had a hard time balancing that. I have a 20-year-old daughter also.
oh
Who just finished interning with me as well. And I think that was the thing. I really didn't know what her work ethic was like. She's had other jobs, but I didn't
yeah,
know. And
I know.
I was pleasantly surprised also.
Me too. And I remember Jillian had a few internships, right? Like she
Yeah.
had like really good internships. And I remember like everyone would be like, she's amazing. She
You'd be
works
like, you're
so
just
hard.
saying that. Yeah.
And I'm and I'm
Right.
like, I'm like, wait, she yells at me from her bedroom to get water for her. Like I'm just
Exactly.
like, you know what I mean? I'm like,
Yeah, I do know what
are
you
you
mean.
sure? Are you sure? But then it ended up being, I mean, it's like I'm like, wow, yeah. So same. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Really similar. Why do you think it's so important for women to share advice and learn from other women?
I think it's the most important thing. And I think because when I was younger, I was very, very, very close to my great grandmother. And she, was there for me during my childhood and was the most important person in my life. And when she passed and I was in high school, I kind of felt like for a while, like I didn't really have older women to go to. You know what I mean? And I felt like I tried to replace that with different people that I met along the way. And and I was really lucky. I've had a lot of women in my life that have, been amazing, great friends, but always older women, I was
Yeah.
always like kind of always had older friends. And then I don't know. I mean, I guess the I watch a lot of documentaries. Like I watched some of the best, I think, are Jane Fonda's My Life in Five Acts, Nora Ephron's It's All Copy, and Everything's Copy, which is great. And the one that just came out about Martha Stewart. And when you see women at a different point in their lives, like reflecting back, you realize that there's a lot of universal, tales of
Truths.
the heart and
Yeah.
truths, and I think that that's a beautiful thing to see, and even the difficult times, because it just makes you realize we all have them.
I think you also think that everybody who's really successful has not had any bumps, like that everybody had perfect love life, perfect marriage, all of the things. And there not been any detours. And I think when you see these, you realize, I mean, all of those women had tumultuous lives, romantic
Yeah.
lives, especially,
Yeah,
right?
they all had romantic, and that's sometimes something you do see, but in Nora Ephron, I mean, when the title "Everything is Copy," what's amazing about that is everything is fucking copy. So it's like she says when she used to go home after school and her parents were home, she would walk in and she might have had a bad day, blah 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 was mean and da 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 da, da, and, whatever her bad day was at 12 or 14, and her parents would be everything. They'd just look at her and be like, "Everything's copy."
Yep.
So use it all to write to, you know what I
And she
mean?
did. She
And
really
she
did.
did, so I think, there's, I don't know, there's just,
It-
it's a beautiful thing. And there's just so many inspiring women out there to learn from,
but it sounds like you, Trish, have been like you inherently knew that at an early age, maybe earlier than most people, that you knew that all of this there was a reason for all of this to getting you to the next place.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that you right, in some situations, it's either you develop that attitude or you develop the opposite attitude and you become a
Yeah. Why is
victim,
this happening? Yeah.
why is this happening? And I've never ever said, even with like the painful stuff, I've never ever said, why is it happening? You know what I mean? It's happening, so I don't live in the past. Um, I keep going forward, but I did know I don't know, I just innately knew.
What advice would you give somebody in their 20s, like Jillian, who's confused about their career path? Not that Jillian is, but if someone were, what advice would you give her?
Maybe the same advice Andrew gave me. Oh, wow, I'm having a lot of full circle moments. But the first thing that came to my mind, so I'm going to go with that, is do what you love and the money will come. I
Hmm.
really think that we sometimes we have these careers and I think that I don't know. I just maybe it's the money will come. Okay, fine. Everyone wants to hear that, but I think do what you love. I mean, if
Yeah.
you can find something you love to do, do it. I mean,
It's rare.
yeah. And it's such a gift, So I think that if you find something you love, then you're very lucky.
What do you hope most for the future of TWP?
It's really important to me that we continue to evolve and we continue to make great clothes that women love and want to wear. Like it is the most important thing to me. I really want to do a good job. I want people to say, she did a good job. And it's not about the recognition part, because that part I've never really, probably this is the only interview. I don't know. I haven't done that many interviews, I've just always kind of admired you and, and really, really loved your store and really loved what you did and your sensibility. And, I've gone to your stores, a few times and I mean, a lot of times over the years, and just like, and so I wanted to do that, but it's also like kind of getting outside my comfort zone. I'm trying to do things that I'm not comfortable with
Hmm.
and trying to do them in a very honest way,
Hmm.
because it's like I don't know how else to do things. For me, it's just like I just want to and I also really am more interested in like who my customer is, not in the way that I think most people are. with marketing and social media now, but I'm really interested in who my actual customer is, because I want to go with her, to this wherever she's traveling. I want to go with her to the south of France. I want to go with her to, and I just throw that out. I'm obviously all of a sudden thinking of 1,000 places I want to go, but it's like, I want to be, I want to do a good job. I want her to always feel like if she has an occasion that she could come in and find something that looks good on her. I mean, a lot
Well,
of our
I
customers
think
are a
you're
little
really
older.
serving her. I think you're really serving her. It's like you really want to help her. Whereas it's not about who's our customer so we can sell more to her. It's like, how do we help her? How do we support her? I mean, I
Yeah.
feel that way about your clothes. I think they're different from anything that we've ever carried in that way.
Oh, thank you. No, it's with it. Thank you. Oh my God, you just made my entire day. I was so nervous about doing this. Do you want to talk tomorrow?
Yeah,
Can we
10 o'clock
can we-
tomorrow.
yeah, can we schedule this again? No, thank you. That means a lot to me. I mean, I guess like I just want to do a good job, and I want to do a good job for who my customer is. And it's like, it's like I love meeting my customers. I love, you learn so much. I mean, you obviously know that you own a store, you're in there, you're with women all the time. For me, it's like I just like I'm like almost like a ticker tape a little bit, like, running down here. I'm like, when I go into a store, I'm like, da 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 da. You know what I mean? It's like all this information comes in, and there's so much information, and then you meet these incredible women. Like, I met this woman who was 60 years old, who had gone through a difficult divorce, and now had just gotten accepted to like a medical school. Like, amazing. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
and then I'm always driven and inspired by them, and so it's driven and inspired by their life stories as well. And I always think that that's kind of the thing that connects us all, right? Is this
Yeah.
universal tales of love and tales of the heart. And then also just like figuring it out, like arms, there's just different issues. And I fit on me, and I'm older and I'm short, and I fit on my fit model. So I'm 5'4", she's 5'10". We have completely different bodies. If I pin it on me and I pin it on her, it fits both of us. So it's also how it fits, because a lot of times I couldn't wear pleated pants because I couldn't find any to fit me. So I made a pair that fit me, and now it's our number one selling pant, the Dee,
Yeah.
and so it's like, it's also just kind of like trying to figure out what's not there, but it's not because you're going into the market and being like, it's just kind of like what you can't find. And sometimes it's not even based on what you can't find. It's just what you want. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I don't know, it's amazing. It's really, I'm lucky. I really am. I have a great job. I didn't make it to my prom. Yeah. And I don't remember. I had a dress, I had an outfit, and I have
What was the
no
dress?
idea. I have no idea what it even looked like. Isn't that weird? I didn't make it to my prom. But it was like 86. So my hair was, out to here and really super big. And I don't know what it was though. I have no idea. I can't remember.
Do you remember why you didn't make it? Was it you had a fight with your boyfriend? You had a date, you had a plan, and
I have this really, I don't know, a selective memory. And there's some things I just don't tap into anymore. But it sounds like a fight with a boyfriend could have been what it was. You know what I mean? I'm not really sure, but that sounds like vaguely familiar. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't make it.
Thank you, Trish, so much.
Oh, thank you.
What We Wore is produced by Capital and Balto Creative Media. The original song, Someone So Enchanting, was composed and performed by Britt Drozda. Please follow us on Instagram at What We Wore Podcast for additional content and show updates.